Welcome to the True Crime Storyteller. This video contains audio only. If you want to see images from the true crime stories, check out my Instagram account and tap the follow button to stay tuned. On March 11th, 2011, a quiet evening at the upscale Lululemon store in Bethesda, Maryland, was brutally disrupted by a horrific crime that left the community in shock. What began as an apparently ordinary workday ended in a nightmare, where a brutal murder and the unraveling of a sinister plot forever altered the lives of two female employees. It was a customer who first discovered something terrible had happened at the Lululemon store the following morning. The customer, who regularly visited the store during his morning rounds, found it odd that the doors were closed despite the regular opening hours. After some time, he knocked on the door and called the store manager, who arrived around 8 a.m. to open the store. When the manager, with a routine sense of expectation, opened the doors, she was immediately confronted with a chaotic interior. Clothing items were scattered across the floor, and there were clear signs of a struggle. Some racks had fallen over, and accessories and damaged products were strewn about. The store resembled a battlefield, with bloody stains decorating the floor. As she stepped inside, she heard a faint, weak sound coming from within, which immediately concerned her. The sound resembled a pleading moan that broke the silence of the store. The manager went to investigate and soon found the severely injured Brittany Norwood. Norwood was lying on the floor in the back room of the store, bound with a taut rope tying her hands and feet. Her face and arms were bloodied and bruised, giving her a terrifying and helpless appearance. She was wounded, her clothing torn and soaked with blood. In a weakened voice, she pleaded for help, her eyes filled with panic and pain. The manager, shocked by the gruesome sight, immediately called 911. While waiting for help, she continued to explore the store, hoping to find more clues about what had happened. It was then that she found Jana Murray, lifeless on the store floor, submerged in a pool of blood. Jana's body was horrifically battered. It was a terrible sight. Her body showed over 300 injuries, including deep cuts and blows inflicted by various objects found in the store: a hammer, a screwdriver, and a metal clothing rack. Jana's death resulted from a horrific attack. Her skull was crushed, and there were clear signs of torture and prolonged violence. The injuries were not only numerous, but also particularly cruel, indicating an attack executed with extreme hostility and intent. The pattern of the injuries, combined with the chaos in the store, added to the sense of horror that the discovery brought. It seemed to be a scene of pure brute force and relentless cruelty, something beyond the usual bounds of violence. When the police arrived, the state of the store only became more unmistakable. Forensic teams found evidence of a violent struggle everywhere, blood traces, fingerprints on the weapons used, and an overall sense of chaos. The investigation that followed revealed an extremely violent crime, with Jana Murray being murdered with a degree of brutality that underscored the shocking nature of the event. Brittany Norwood, the surviving employee of the Lululemon store, was clearly in shock when the police arrived. Her exhaustion and confusion were evident, but her story initially seemed reasonably convincing. She claimed that the store had been robbed by two masked men shortly after closing time. According to Norwood, these men had bound them both. Jana Murray was then brutally attacked and murdered, while Norwood herself was beaten and abused by the intruders. Initial impressions from the police appeared to support Norwood's story. The store was in a chaotic state. Clothing items were scattered. There were signs of a struggle, and Norwood's injuries seemed to indicate a violent struggle. The bloody scene and the confused state in which Norwood was found suggested a brutal break-in, making her account initially believable. However, as the police investigation progressed, increasing doubts arose about Norwood's testimony. Small but significant inconsistencies began to emerge. Lack of break-in evidence. The first notable discrepancy was the absence of typical signs of a break-in. The police found no forced entry into the store, no broken windows or doors, and no other indications of an external break-in. This was particularly strange for an alleged violent robbery. Injuries and evidence. The nature of Norwood's injuries raised suspicion. While her injuries initially suggested an attack by multiple individuals, further investigation revealed that many of the bloodstains and traces found on her clothing pointed to her own involvement in spreading blood throughout the store. There were no clear signs of a struggle with two people, such as physical evidence of multiple attackers in the store. Targeted attack. It appeared that the attack was particularly targeted at Jana Murray. The degree of violence and the weapons used were specifically focused on Murray and were consistent with prolonged torture. This did not fit with a random robbery where victims are attacked indiscriminately. Changing stories. As time went on, Norwood's story changed several times. Her initial claim of two intruders shifted as evidence accumulated, and the police began to uncover more details about her own role in the attack. The inconsistencies in her statements, combined with forensic findings, made the police suspicious. Bloodstain analysis. Bloodstain analysis revealed that most of the blood came from Jana Murray, and the pattern of the blood spatter did not match the idea of a quick robbery. The way the blood was distributed and the placement of the bloodstains indicated a scene that was carefully set up by someone who had taken the time to spread the blood throughout the store. The combination of these inconsistencies led the police to suspect that Norwood's story was false. The investigation revealed that the attack appeared to be more of a personal matter, more an explosive act of violence than a robbery by external intruders. This led to further interrogations and eventually to the revelation of Norwood's involvement in the murder of Jana Murray. As forensic experts conducted their work, they began to suspect that the attack was not the work of outsiders. The first thing they noticed were the inconsistencies in the physical evidence that did not match Brittany Norwood's account. She claimed she was forced to wear shoes by the intruders while being bound and abused, but a close examination of the shoe prints told a different story. The shoes Norwood was said to have worn were soaked with Jana Murray's blood. What was crucial, however, was the nature of these bloodstains. The prints and blood spatter were distributed in such a way that it seemed the wearer had walked freely around the store without the constraints one would expect from someone who was bound and threatened. This immediately raised questions about the credibility of Norwood's claims. Additionally, the police discovered that the knots used to bind Norwood were notably loose. It seemed she could have easily freed herself, strongly suggesting that she might have tied the ropes herself after the murder had occurred. The duct tape on her wrists also showed signs of superficial application, as if it was used to stage a scene rather than actually function as a means of immobilization. Furthermore, investigators found crucial evidence in Norwood's car that further undermined her story. Jana's blood was found on several of Norwood's personal items, indicating that she had gone to her vehicle immediately after the murder to erase her traces. Jana's phone and a bloody shirt were also found in her car, crucial elements pointing to Norwood not being the victim, but rather the perpetrator trying to shift the blame to intruders with a hastily devised plan. The blood pattern analysis in the store also played a decisive role in unraveling Norwood's deceitful testimony. Forensic experts discovered that most of the blood spatter and signs of struggle were concentrated around the spot where Jana was murdered. This meant that the fight Norwood described with the supposed intruders did not match the physical evidence in the store. The murder weapon, along with other objects used to torture Jana, such as a hammer, a screwdriver, and a metal clothing rack, were all found in proximity to the body, with blood traces showing that Norwood had used each weapon in her rage. When this evidence was pieced together, it became clear that Brittany Norwood had made a sophisticated attempt to cover up the murder by making it look like a failed robbery. The evidence, from the shoe prints to the blood pattern and forensic inconsistencies, left no room for doubt. The attack was an act of murder carefully carried out by Norwood herself, while she went to great lengths to conceal the truth. Jana Murray's autopsy reports painted a grim and detailed picture of the horrific brutality she had endured. Murray had sustained over 331 separate injuries, including broken bones, cuts, and severe injuries to her skull and neck. Forensic experts determined that at least 5 different weapons were used during the attack, all of which were sourced from the store. This indicated that the perpetrator not only acted ruthlessly, but also took the time to switch weapons during the attack, something that was completely incompatible with the scenario of a quick robbery as Norwood had initially claimed. Among the weapons used were a hammer, which inflicted multiple blows to Jaina's head and chest, and a screwdriver, which caused deep stab wounds in her neck and back. The metal clothing rack used as a bludgeoning weapon had caused such extreme force that it had broken multiple bones. Some of Jaina's injuries suggested she was even still alive, while some of these brutal blows were inflicted, indicating that the attack must have been prolonged and intense. Additionally, the autopsy report revealed a crucial detail that proved pivotal in undermining Norwood's story. Jaina had multiple defensive wounds on her hands and forearms, indicating that she had desperately fought back against her attacker. The nature of these wounds, combined with the time required to use so many different weapons, made it clear that this was not a quick, random attack, as one might expect in a burglary. Instead, it showed the systematic cruelty and deliberateness of someone who had full control over the situation. As the police delved into the details of the night, Norwood was interrogated again. Her earlier statement about the robbery showed increasing cracks. The inconsistencies in her story, combined with the forensic evidence, put more and more pressure on her. Detectives also brought forward that there had been a conflict between her and Jaina, with Norwood trying to hide a few stolen leggings. When Jaina discovered this and confronted her, it seemed that the situation escalated. During a later interrogation, Norwood's story fell apart completely. The pressure from the evidence and the continuing contradictions in her statements led her to admit that there had been a heated argument. Jaina had confronted her about stealing clothes, and in a blind rage, Norwood had exploded. The frustration, along with the risk of being caught for theft, seemed to have driven her to violence. She lost control and attacked Jaina with everything she could find in the store, ultimately killing her. This conflict, which initially seemed to involve something minor like stolen leggings, quickly escalated into a gruesome murder, with Norwood losing control completely. The violence was not the result of a sudden outburst, but rather a prolonged assault in which the perpetrator took the time to punish and ultimately kill Jaina in multiple ways. In January 2012, the trial against Brittany Norwood began, a case closely followed by the media and marked by significant public outrage. Norwood was accused of the brutal murder of her colleague Jaina Murray. It was a trial that not only highlighted the horror of the crime, but also exposed the complex psychology of the perpetrator. Prosecutors painted Norwood as a cold and calculating individual. They argued that the murder was not the result of a moment of impulsiveness, as the defense claimed, but of a deep-seated rage that erupted after Jaina confronted her about stealing clothes. The prosecutors used physical evidence and forensic reports to demonstrate how systematic and cruel the attack had been. The fact that Norwood switched weapons during the murder and used various methods to torment her victim testified to a clear intention to make Murray suffer for an extended period. The details of the attack were unbearable to hear. Prosecutors argued that the duration of the attack and the extreme violence used could hardly be the work of someone in a fit of impulsive rage. Norwood had taken the time to use different objects as weapons, including a hammer, a screwdriver, and a metal clothing rack. The injuries Jaina sustained pointed to prolonged torture, with the victim having repeatedly tried to defend herself, as evidenced by the numerous defensive wounds on her hands and arms. The prosecutors contended that this could not be the result of a momentary lapse of sanity, but rather a deliberate and furious assault. In addition to the physical evidence, the prosecutors highlighted Norwood's attempts to stage the murder as a robbery by two intruders. The staging of the crime, including binding herself and inflicting superficial wounds, indicated someone who was calm and calculating after the murder. Norwood's meticulous efforts to mislead the police, such as wearing blood-stained shoes through the store and spreading false clues, showed that she clearly knew what she had done and was trying to evade the crime. The defense, on the other hand, argued that Norwood's actions were the result of a temporary lapse in sanity caused by extreme stress and fear when Jaina confronted her about theft. They described Norwood as someone acting out of panic and impulse, without a premeditated plan. They asked the jury to view her actions as a brief outburst of uncontrolled emotions, where she had completely lost her self-control. Nonetheless, the jury found it difficult to accept this explanation given the nature of the crime. The evidence was overwhelming: the duration of the attack, the number of different weapons used, and Norwood's detailed attempts to conceal the murder. These were not actions typical of someone experiencing a momentary lapse in sanity. After days of testimony, forensic evidence, and emotional pleas, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. Norwood was found guilty of first-degree murder. During sentencing, the judge emphasized the cruelty of the crime and Norwood's lack of remorse. In a rare step, Norwood was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a decision reflecting the gravity of her actions. The verdict brought a measure of justice for Jayna Murray's family, although their grief over the loss of a daughter and sister, remembered as a vibrant and ambitious young woman, could never be fully alleviated. The trial and conviction of Brittany Norwood left a lasting impact, not only on those involved, but also on the community shocked by the intensity of the murder. The Lululemon murders became a symbol of how a seemingly everyday conflict could escalate into a tragedy of unimaginable proportions in a moment of rage. Jayna Murray's life was brutally cut short, and her family was left with the inconceivable sorrow of her loss. The Bethesda community remained reeling from the fact that such a heinous act could occur in such a peaceful, affluent setting. The case itself remains to this day one of the most chilling crimes in Maryland's recent history, remembered as a dark lesson in the dangers of suppressed rage and the fragile balance between the mundane and the deadly. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.